Welcome to today's Vishlation. We're going to jump right in today because we have a lot of ground to cover. What we're unpacking is a deeply objective, chilling, and systematic timeline of the November 2025 Delhi blast. We're going to look at exactly how a highly localized threat evolved into a completely devastating urban tragedy, flying completely under the radar until it was just too late.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's a genuinely jarring paradox. On one hand, you have a man who achieved rank 1, literally the top spot in the Jammu and Kashmir Public Service Commission exam for medical officers. This is a brilliant doctor, someone who swore an oath to save lives. But at the exact same time, he is Umar Nabi, the mastermind behind the Red Fort bombing. So how does a top-tier medical mind engineer a mass tragedy? Well, to understand this, we really have to look at where the whole thing started.
Section 1. Doctors turn terrorists. The village of doctors darkens.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how these individuals were connected from the start. Umar originally comes from a place called Koil in Pulwama. It's actually known locally as the Village of Doctors because, amazingly, nearly every household there produces medical professionals. Umar and his neighbor, Muzammil, studied together and cracked their medical entrance exams. Umar and a junior named Adil ended up at GMC Srinagar, while Muzammil and Adil's brother, Muzaffar, went to ASCOMS. So what we're looking at here are top-tier medical students forming a highly distributed sleeper cell, perfectly split across two major medical institutions.
Section 2. The Masters of Radicalization. Infiltrating the campus.
The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that these bright minds didn't just radicalize in a vacuum. No, they were actively manipulated from within their own college walls. Over at GMC Srinagar, they crossed paths with Irfan Ahmad. He was officially on the paramedical staff, but in reality, he was a recruiter for Jaish-e-Mohammed. Then there was Nisar ul-Hassan, a general medicine teacher who abused his position of authority to brainwash students with separatist ideologies. And later on, the group brought in Shaheen Saeed. She was an exceptionally bright former government employee who actually abandoned her post, traveled through the Middle East, and brought international terror connections to the table as the head of the women's wing, Jamaat al-Mominat.
So, you're probably asking, how do doctors hide a terror plot in plain sight? Well, by completely twisting their own profession. They communicated using heavily encrypted apps like Threema and Signal, sure, but their actual language was chillingly mundane. A heart specialist? That was their code for a terrorist. The operation theater wasn't some sterile medical room, it was their target location. And when the deadly raw materials were finally prepped and ready to go, the message they sent out was simply, Biryani is ready.
Section 3. The University Cover-Up. A safe haven for terror.
We need to zoom out for a second and examine the massive systemic failure that allowed this cell to operate freely, literally just 30 kilometers from Delhi. This brings us to Al-Falaa University in Faridabad. If you look at the timeline of its founder, Javed Siddiqui, you see a really clear, undeniable pattern of criminality. I mean, it starts with a 7.5 crore chit fund scam way back in 1991, followed by a stint in Tihar jail, and then a highly suspicious trip to Pakistan. By the time we hit 2021, this institution had morphed into the perfect cover. They were brazenly hiring Umar, Muzammil, and their associates as resident doctors, entirely skipping the mandatory no-objection certificates from their previous medical councils.
And what's truly staggering here is how this corrupt institution exploited government loopholes. Despite completely lacking the mandatory Section 12B status required for government funding, Al-Falaa somehow secured massive amounts of public funds. 10 crore rupees. To put that into perspective, that is just what they siphoned through government scholarships alone in a single year. They funneled this money out through shell companies, basically creating a completely unmonitored sanctuary where the terror cell could plot in total peace, commanding their operations right out of Hostel Building 17.
Section 4. Planning Operation D6. Building the Arsenal.
To actively dodge Indian surveillance, the group was smart enough to avoid foreign money during the initial stages. They self-funded their own deadly mission. Back in March 2022, Umar and Muzammil had traveled to Turkey for a 20-day training stint by the TTP, learning exactly how to weaponize commercial materials. When they got back to India, they pooled their own money, 26 lakhs in total. Muzammil, Shaheen, Adil, Muzaffar, and Umar all chipped in their own personal funds. This let them silently build up their arsenal without triggering a single financial alarm.
Now, the terrifying scale of what they dubbed Operation D6 is really encapsulated in this one number, 32. They weren't just planning a single isolated attack. No, they planned to unleash 32 separate car bombs across multiple Indian cities in a highly coordinated strike. And they heavily relied on fertilizer-based explosives purely to avoid the logistical nightmare of trying to acquire military-grade RDX.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, devastating volume of destructive material they quietly managed to amass. It's honestly terrifying. Just 3 to 4 kilometers away from the university, in a little village called Fatehpur Taga, they rented a room and packed it with 2,553 kilograms of ammonium nitrate, 2,900 kilograms of raw explosives, and 358 kilograms of ready-to-use car bomb material. They even set up an electric furnace to melt metals. All of this was just sitting there, completely undetected, just a stone's throw from the nation's capital.
Section 5. The Unraveling. A single poster exposes the plot. So in October 2025, a single oversight caused their entire grand design to spectacularly collapse. Step by step, it all started on October 17th when a highly observant police officer, SP Sandeep, spotted a suspicious Jaish-e-Mohammed warning poster up in Srinagar. Instead of just walking past it, he launched an immediate inquiry. That led to pulling CCTV footage, which exposed 3 local boys. Well, those boys confessed, leading the police straight to Irfan, our paramedical recruiter from earlier. And during interrogation, Irfan finally broke. He laid out the entire master plan operating out of Al-Falah University in Faridabad. Just like that, authorities had grabbed the thread that would unravel the whole shebang.
Following that tip, on October 30th, police raided Al-Falah University. Muzama was caught right off the bat, but Umar somehow managed to flee in a white Hyundai i20. From there, his reality rapidly devolved from being a respected, high-ranking doctor to a completely desperate fugitive. He ended up hiding in a tiny, squalid 10 by 14-foot room in New. For 9 agonizing days, absolutely terrified of the tightening dragnet, he never left. He didn't bathe, he didn't change his clothes. The stench in that tiny room became so unbearable that his landlords actually began to complain. The mastermind was finally cornered.
Section 6. The Final Countdown. November 10th, 2025.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because as we enter the final hours, the timeline accelerates wildly. Knowing he was practically out of time, Umar fled that room at 11 p.m. on November 9th. By 1:01 a.m., completely desperate for cash, he tries to use an ATM, fails, and briefly takes the ATM guard hostage in his car before eventually letting him go. He just drives aimlessly through the night. Fast forward to 3:29 p.m. the next day, he pulls into the relatively empty Suneri Majid parking lot near the Red Fort, and for 3 hours, sitting right there in the parking lot, he assembles the bomb. Finally, at 6:52 p.m., waiting for a red light so a crowd would gather near the Red Fort metro station, he detonates.
The tragic outcome of that day is stark, and it's devastating. 15 innocent lives were lost, and over 20 people were severely injured. It was a horrific consequence of a threat that had been festering, completely unseen and unchecked, right behind the respectable facade of the medical profession and a supposed educational institution.
I want to conclude this Vishlation by leaving you with a chilling final thought. The investigation, officially known as Operation Sindoor, is actually still going on. The arrests of Shaheen, Javed Siddiqui, and the dismantling of that Al-Falah network, that was just the beginning. The lingering, deeply unsettling question we have to ask ourselves is this: if a top-ranked doctor and an entire corrupt university administration could mask a terror cell so effectively, how many more sleeper cells are hiding in plain sight today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay tuned as we continue to break down the complexities of the world around us.